Hey, Shawnee from SpeedCubeReview.com. So we are going to do the 2017 Mega Speed Cube comparison. Now, this is coming out in the very beginning of 2017, so I'm sure there's going to be cubes coming out later in the year. And if there's a new cube that came out that's not listed here, there's most likely going to be a full review somewhere on the channel right when it comes out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at each major company, because a lot of the cubes in each company feel very similar, talk about how they feel, and then at the end I'm going to talk about some of the biggest ones that are around today that a lot of people will use, as well as a few different hidden things that you might not know about, or ones that might be of interest that aren't the top few that people use. So let's take a look. So I'm recording this at the end because I didn't realize how long it's going to take to go through everything. If you want to just jump to where the most, common cubes are, kind of the big ones at the end, I'd recommend click on the timestamp in the description and that'll take you right to it. Now before I get going, all of these cubes could be used if you are under 10 seconds solving. They're all really nice cubes. They all work really well. There is no best. There's no best cube at all. If there was, then every single cube would be using the exact same cube. But there's a lot of different options, and most of it is just what feels best for you, what you might like to use. So kind of use this video, if you don't know what you want, to judge what feels nice. Maybe if you have something already, you can find something completely different or something similar to it depending on what you were looking for. So I'm going to be a little bit more casual about this one, and I'm going to look at the cubes alphabetical order from the companies and talk about each cubes there. So first we have Cyclone Boys. Now, a lot of the Cyclone Boys cubes are very similar to the Weilong. So even if we look at this one right here, the pieces are very similar to what you might see from a Weilong, and they're all slight variations on that. All the Cyclone Boys cubes are quite smooth, nothing too scratchy at all, and they all are pretty stable. So two of my favorites are the Cyclone Boys Cloud, which really does feel like a Zhanchi or Weilong, just a bit faster. I had to really work to slow this thing down. Then recently they came out with the FangShi, which feels a bit like a Hualong, and I'll show those cubes a bit later on. This one is a little bit more flexible than other ones I've tried, but it does perform nicely, having above 45-degree corner cutting and pretty nice reverse. I've always liked very stable cubes, and the Cloud is one of my favorites there. Now as you see, corner cutting is not near 45, but on kind of standard tensions, I like mine a little bit tighter. On standard tensions, it does cut well, and really you don't need too much more over this. Really any Cyclone Boys cubes could be nice to use. None of them are really going to be that bad, but I don't see any top cubers using these because I feel like the performance is just a little below some of the other ones on the market, but they're all quite nice and pretty smooth and stable. So now on to Gan cubes. And their first really big one was the GuoGuan. The GuoGuan was really nice and a lot of people used it. It really set the bar for what cubes should be. Then they came out with their fifth one, which was the Zhanchi. Zhanchi looks very similar. The corners do not have as much of a curve on the inside. It feels maybe a little bit more stable. And the Zhanchi was used to break the world record a couple times. Once with Felix Zemdag's 5.66, another one with Mats Falk's 5.55. Corner cutting is pretty decent with this. These cubes, the Gan cubes, are the ones that really first introduced the torpedo. And that, if you see here, is why they call it a torpedo. This looks a little torpedo-esque. Now, Gan came out with a sixth cube called a FangShi, but it just did not really take off. And the Zhanchi, the fifth one, is still their flagship one. This has been out for quite some time, and I don't see it as one that really I would recommend as a cube to get nowadays, just because there's so many more that are much cheaper and work just as well, if not better. The one thing that I would use this for is mini sizes. The Zhanchi comes in 57mm, 55mm, 50mm, and 42mm. Now the 42mm is pretty small. I keep this with me almost all the time. It's a small enough size where I can really take it anywhere and still speed solve, but not too small. Now also this one, just from breaking it in and using it so much, this corner cuts really well. Although center caps can come off. I still see a lot of people using the 50mm Zhanchi for one-handed. It's a good size, a good balance between being, Small enough for one-handed, but not too small at all. And the 50mm Zanchi might be a good one to use for one-handed. Really, when I got this one, it still felt kind of big, and I first practiced one-handed with my 42mm, and then as I got better with that, moved to the 50mm, and now I use basically a full-size cube. So that's Diane. Everything has a pretty smooth feeling to it. Nothing, again, too scratchy, but kind of blocky. And the best thing for these are the smaller models. The first big cube from FangShi was the Shuangren. They had a full size and a mini. The full size has caps and the minis have caps as well, but they're more embedded in the piece. It's actually the same internals, just with different size caps. The one thing with the FangShi Shuangren was it's very light, scratchy, and fast. So for this, you can just hear how scratchy that sounds. Now, one thing about this is that it's extremely fast also, and for its time, it was probably one of the fastest cubes you could ever get. Now, it's very common for a lot of the cubes to be super fast out of the box. I still see the mini one a lot for one-handed, mainly because of its speed and its smaller size. It's 54.5mm, so a little bit smaller than the 55mm Zanchi, but not quite as small as the 50mm. I really like this just because of how it looks. It looks really cool with those stickers and the, what people call the illusion cube, where it's primary or white internals and then black caps. After that, they came out with the GuoGuan, and the GuoGuan for some time on the website was the fastest cube on the market. It was very fast. It took quite a bit of the scratchiness out and added a little bit of weight. It does feel very nice. It feels very stable, but kind of soon after that, they replaced it with the GuoGuan. The full-size GuoGuan has indents, so you can see right there, the stickers are actually indented. So it's pretty hard to scratch those, but the stickers are kind of smaller because of that. I don't feel too much while turning, so it doesn't make a huge difference there. This is a bit slower and a bit more stable than this was, but corner cutting is pretty decent. Now, when we get to some of the other cubes later on, you'll see corner cutting is just insane on some of these, going way past 45. Honestly, there's no reason why you would need it to cut that much, but it is nice in that aspect. The GuoGuan does have a mini version as well, and I know some people who do use this. Same thing, it's about 54.5mm, and not as fast or scratchy as the Shuangren though. This is something that it doesn't perform super amazing, but it has a very fast, very stable feel to it, and this is something that I still enjoy to use today. Now let's get to one of the biggest players on the market, Gan Cubes. The Gan 3 was 55mm and quite flexible and almost cheap sounding. It was very fast though and cut well. Replacing the Gan 3 was a Gan 357. And the Gan 357, 57mm instead of 55mm. And this one is the Ultimate Edition that has the nicer stickers, as well as the metal core. Now the Gans 357 had a plastic or nylon core, and you see this actually has metal rods. That metal core really helps with the stability of the cube, and this cube actually was the main of Felix Zemdeg's for a short while. It is a little loud and flexible, but with the metal core it helps a lot. Now, after I said Felix went to this, the Gans 356 came out. And that's what really blew people away. When the 356 came out, it was something that we really hadn't seen before. The combination of speed and stability was just incredible. Now this had some catching issues when it came out. That's been resolved with the replacement of the caps, and the 356 version 1 has now been replaced with the 356 version 2. You can tell by the sticker. The gold sticker is the newer one, and the caps are a bit more curved there. One thing with this is there are screws in all of the pieces, making them feel very stable and also very quiet. You don't hear much noise with this because of how stable the pieces are with those screws. It's not too heavy, although heavier than some of the lighter cubes on the market. It performs extremely well. You can just see this corner cutting from almost anywhere. These cubes come in different versions. There's a standard, Then there is sometimes Advanced and then Masters, and now with the Gan Air there's Grandmaster, which the Gan Air is right here, and I'll talk about in just a second. The main difference between them is inclusion of different spring sets, and sometimes different stickers. There's not different cubes completely, but just other versions that have extra pieces on it. The Gan Air came out and looks very, very, very similar to the 356. On the 356 version 2, there's a lot more tracks on the corner, you can see right there. And on the Air, it's quite a bit more smoothed out. Now with this, there are still screws in all the pieces. There's a new version called the Ultimate, which is not mass produced quite yet. I have one on order, but I don't plan on doing a big review of it because it's not yet mass produced for all companies to have it, but they've replaced the metal screws with plastic ones or nylon ones. There's also a few different things to make it feel a little bit lighter, and that I know Felix has been using recently. So the Gan Air is his current main and was used to break the world record just recently with the 4.73 second solve. That one had magnets in it, but again, that's something that Gan has done and not mass produced just yet. The Air, a little bit louder, but not by much. It's still one of the quieter cubes on the market. It feels quite stable, and with this version, the springs have different colors, so it's very easy to switch them out and change the tensions. I like higher tension cubes, and so I put in the orange springs here. On some of the other versions that I have, I've tried the lighter ones, and those are nice too. It's not that one is much better than the other, it's just how you like it to feel. This one feels very smooth, very controllable. It does have a higher price tag though, at usually around $25. Quickly, I'm going to talk about the Kung Fu 3x3. It looks like a newer company, but their cube looks very similar to some other ones like the YJ 3x3 as well as the Warrior W from QiYi. But this seems to be its own design because I don't see anything that's exact copy of it. This cube performs quite well. Nothing too crazy about it. It corner cuts decently forward and reverse. It feels pretty stable and easily could be used as someone's main, but it's not anything above and beyond. I kind of relate it to a Cyclone Boys cube, but a little more bubbly and rounded than Cyclone Boys cubes are. This one's going to take the longest. These are the MoYu cubes. So the first big splash was with the Weilong. There's a full size and a mini. The mini is about 54.5 millimeters, kind of squared off in shape and a little similar to the Zanchi. I feel like this one's a bit more fluid and not as boxy. There was also an Oolong then came out, and there's the mini version, which is still the V1 mold, and then they replaced it with the V2 mold because of V1 corner twists, and the V2 still can. Oop, this is actually the GT. This is the version 2. It still can turn, not as easily. I like tighter tensions, and honestly, with this version 1 mold mini, I've had one corner twist every about 1,000 solves, so it's not too common as long as you're an accurate turner and keep the cube on slightly tighter tensions. Even with these tensions, it still can cut around 45 degrees. Both the Weilong and Oolong are quite similar. They feel pretty smooth, but out of the box, it starts off scratchy, so you definitely have to break it in just a little bit. Now, the Oolong is one of the heaviest cubes on the market. The GT, which I accidentally had out earlier, is even heavier at over 100 grams. I don't think there's any other cube that I have that's a plastic speed cube that's over 100 grams. The GT, when it came out, had squared off corners, a little bit smoother corner design as well, since the V2 and V1 had sort of this triangular thing right there. Can cut very well from almost anywhere, and flows really nice. I used this one for blind solving just because I like the weight of it. When this came out, it didn't get quite the praise I think MoYu wanted because, this was the newest version of the Oolong, which was one of the biggest cubes for a long time. The Oolong V2 set the world record with the 4.9 solve by Lucas Edders and was a main of a lot of people. I think because people started getting used to the faster, more flexible cubes, the GT just was not what everyone was looking for at that time. There are some other cubes, like the Dayanma, but this is one that looked kind of interesting and promising, but it just doesn't perform quite up to par with some of the other ones. It's kind of cool to have, and I do like solving on it. There are some other cubes from MoYu. There is the Tanglong. The Tanglong did set the world record by Keaton Ellis. It just happened to be the same day that Lucas Edders set it with the Oolong. And so his 5.09 solve did not quite count as a world record, but the Tanglong was used for that. This is one of the most stable cubes that could be considered a speed cube as well. It corner cuts well, over 45, almost from anywhere. And although it can feel slow, it's controllable. Now this one I've restickered with some brighter shades, but the Tanglong is a really nice cube. There was also the Hualong, which I actually believe was before the Tanglong. I'm going a little out of order. The Hualong is a bit flexible. After the Weilong and Aolong, the Hualong kind of set things apart with being that more flexible cube. I slowed mine down with a little bit of lube and tightened the tensions, so it doesn't quite corner cut as well, but it's not bad at all. If you like something a little bit more flexible, then the Hualong would be the one to have. Lastly, we have the Weilong GTS. This is nothing like the regular Weilong. It's quite flexible, one of the scratchiest cubes out of the box. During my review, I compared this to a FangShi cube. And just hear that compared to the Tanglong, which feels quite smoother. This is the current main of a lot of people. Of all the MoYu cubes, this is their highest end one. So this cube can corner cut very, very well. So you can see right here, it corner cuts from pretty much anywhere. You can get what they call the dual tensioning system, which is where you can adjust the tension as well as the flexibility of the cube. Instead of replacing springs, you can do that both with this. And yeah, this is the current main of a lot of people. I still think the Tanglong is a nice cube. Actually, I think all of these are nice cubes, but these are kind of the two opposite sides of the spectrum, being very flexible and fast, and very controllable and smooth. MoYu has a lot of sub-brands, so I'm going to go through those kind of quickly as well. There's the Cong's Design Mei Ying. Cong's Design had a Yu Ying before this, which I would compare a lot to the Tanglong. The Mei Ying was sort of his flagship one, and was my main for quite a while, actually. It's a bit flexible, but feels very squared off. You can corner cut pretty well, over 45 on more looser tensions. My tighter ones kind of stop right around 45. The Mei Ying is a fantastic cube. GuoGuan was the next one that came out, and this is the Yuxiao. A lot of people said it felt like an upgraded Mei Ying. I kind of felt like they're just two different variations on the same idea. They both have very squared off corners and quite flexible. This, the GuoGuan, has quite a bit more contact between the pieces though. So it still corner cuts relatively the same, but you can hear that compared to this sound. It felt a little bit more stable. The color scheme was a little bit different though. And you can see right here that the green was a little bit lighter and I believe the red was darker and the blue was darker. They changed this and have made it so it matches these colors because people were not too happy with it. And we have the Mei Ying and the Yuxiao. There's some other ones that have come out, like the M3. M3 probably should get quite a bit more praise than it does right now. It's gotten lost in the slew of cubes that have come out. It feels like a lighter version of the GTS, so it's not as bulky as this one. It's a bit flexible. I do find I get a little bit of catching on it, but I've said to a lot of people that if it's catching, it's something with more of your turning, that it's not turning completely accurately, because if you turn something 100% accurate, you're not going to have any catches on any cube. So that's the M3, kind of similar to all three of these right here. This is a little more, feels a little more scratchy. This feels like there's a lot of contact between the pieces, almost sandpapery, and then this is a little bit lighter. There's also the Mojue Shosu. I believe I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. This I'd compare a lot to a Hualong. It's flexible like a Hualong. It doesn't have as tight as springs like the Hualong. It moves a lot like a Hualong. Feels a little bit lighter, a little bit like maybe the plastic's thinner. But there's so many options for MoYu, it's hard to break through that, so I'll talk about the rest of those at the end. We're going to keep on going with QiYi MoFangGe. They had the bullfight. Not a bad cube. People compared it to the Aolong, but definitely much more simple of a design. And then they came out with the Thunderclap, and this is what blew people away. It was under $10 and performed very well. It was very fluid, and after using the Mei Ying for a long time, this was the cube that made me rethink what cube I should be using. It's extremely nice, extremely smooth, kind of light. The big thing is it just feels like it flows very well. I'm going to talk about the V2 of this and then jump back to one that came out in between then. The Thunderclap V2 looks similar but with squared off corners. It didn't feel the same though. They changed the springs on it, and it doesn't seem like much more other than that, but it just feels very different. A lot of people have said they get slight catches on this, they don't on this one, while other people feel like this one flows a bit more because of the springs and kind of a lighter, scratchier design. I'm indifferent on which one I like more. I use them both interchangeably. The only thing that I don't like on the V1 is the green color they use. They've changed that in the V2. This V1 kind of looks like yellow to me in some lights. X-Man is a designer for QiYi, came out with the Tornado, and that is quite flexible. It felt, a bit clicky, and what I did to make it feel how I wanted to was put a lot of lubrication in it to slow it down. Now, honestly, it feels like, the flexibility of a Gan Cube, honestly, is what I feel like. It definitely doesn't perform like one, but just the amount of flexibility with it. This is one that I do really like. It has really big holes right here, and if I was going to tell someone how to set this up, how to make it work really well, it's using a lot of lubrication to slow it down and tightening the tensions to make it a little more controllable. There's a budget cube they have called the Sail. I'm not going to go too much into this. I'm going to make a video on budget cubes later on. And the Volk, though, is their latest one. Now, the Volk is 55.5 millimeters. It is their flagship one right now. It's a little reminiscent to the GuoGuan Yuxiao. It corner cuts from basically anywhere. It really doesn't corner twist because of the squared off corners. It's quite fast. All of these cubes are pretty smooth right out of the box. Kind of a plastic similar to how I was describing the Cyclone Boys at the beginning. This was used by Matt's Volk to set the world record at 4.74 seconds, which was recently beaten by Felix Zemdeg's with the 4.73. This is one of the other big options today, and I'm going to talk about this at the very end, comparing it with the Gan and another cube. One thing about this cube that makes it a little bit different is the springs are cone-shaped, they're conical, and I believe that cone shape makes it feel a bit more stable. The only cube I've seen that has that same design is the Gans 357. We're almost done, we're going to wrap this up a little bit faster. Rubik's brand, now I'm not going to talk too much about this. This was their original design, and then they came out with the new version, and the new version definitely performs better. I mean, you can see this, corner cutting, barely works. With the new design, it's a bit better, and can be pretty fast. Their Speed Cube is the same sort of design, but you can pop these caps off and tension it. So the Speed Cube one, though, same sort of corner cutting, same sort of reverse, but you can tension it. These are quite fast. There's a lot of people complain that say you shouldn't get a Rubik's brand. You could easily be a fast cuber using this. You're not going to see any top cubers using this over, let's say, the Volk or the Gan or the GTS, but great to learn on. You can still be quite fast with it. You can easily be sub 20 with it. I'm not going to make any claims about being sub 10. It's a fine cube. It's fast. Definitely not quite a speed cube like the other ones, but there we go. Shengshou kind of sat out for a little bit, it seems. They have their Aurora, which I've re-stickered so the holes seem a bit bigger. The big thing with the Aurora is it's smooth. I would say this is the quietest cube next to the Gan 356. This is the one that I used for quite a while. I started on the Aurora after my Rubik's brand, and definitely a nice cube. They came out with, though, the FangShi, and this I would compare to a lighter GTS. Corner cutting, extremely nice. Reverse corner cutting, pretty nice as well. This is a fantastic cube. This is one that should be up there with some of the other ones, but I think people see Shengshou and they just think it's a cheap brand. And the FangShi definitely proves that wrong. It's very similar to the M3. So the M3 and the FangShi are very similar in shape, as well as corner cutting, feel. Very, very similar cubes. We're going to finish this off with two more. YJ. YJ is more of a budget brand cube. They've got the Sulong, which I've got the clear plastic here. Guanlong, which is the very cheap one. But we're not going to talk about that one in this one. We're going to talk about that in the budget cube one. We'll also have a few others. And so wrap it up, we've got the Yushin. And there's only one major Yushin 3x3. This was used by Colin Burns to break the world record with the 5.25 solve. Flows very well. Corner cuts pretty well. I kind of relate this one to the Hualong, where it's not completely squared off corners. It's a little bit flexible. There's a lot of talk about replacing springs, but I really, after trying it, don't feel like it's really necessary. Not a bad cube at all. Obviously can be used to break world records. Nothing too extreme in design. So here we are. We've gone through all these cubes, and which one should you get? Any of them. Now, I'm sure you don't want that specific answer, and I'll give you a little more detail in a second. But what I mean is that you can learn how to solve a cube, and you can be a sub 20 or even sub 10 cuber on any of these. Any of these are great cubes. None of them will really hold you back at all. Now, a lot of people talk about beginner cubes or more advanced cubes. I really don't think there's a big difference with that. Yes, some cubes are quite fast and a little uncontrollable for some people starting out, but even with that said, just with a little practicing, you can easily get used to it. Or if you get a little bit of Trax's 50K, you can slow it down by putting a bunch of it in there, and that'll make it easy to use. The few that I want to stand out and I want to talk to you guys about is the Weilong GTS, the Gan Air, and the Valk 3. These are the two biggest ones right now. They feel a little bit different, and so let's talk about that. First, as far as size, the GTS is the biggest with about 56.5 millimeters. Then we have the 356 Air, which is 56 millimeters, and the Valk, which is 55.5. So this being smallest, this being largest. Now, if you've never tried different size cubes, it can seem sort of random, the size difference, and make little difference, but it can be huge. When you're actually trying a 55.5 and a 56.5 millimeter cube, you can feel that difference in your hands. As far as how they perform, they all corner cut from pretty much anywhere. Neither of them pop. All of them are quite fast, and really, slowing them down with lubrication might be needed for all of them. Now, all three of these, I've tried putting magnets in. They're all nice doing that. A few perks of each. This one, the GTS, is very scratchy compared to these other two, and has a kind of a good solid feel to the cube. The Gan Air is, of course, really light. It flows well. It has an extremely smooth feel to it. The biggest perk of the Air is the GES springs, the different springs you can get to easily adjust the tensions to how you want it to feel. The Valk 3, smallest of the bunch. This is the only one of these that come in stickerless, so if you want a stickerless cube and it's between these three, this would be the one to get. This one is smooth, not as smooth as this one, but not as scratchy as the GTS, and has a nice sort of almost airy feel to it. Now, if you're looking for something that's a little bit cheaper, because this is around $20, this is $25, this would be the cheapest one of that. If you want something of this quality that is a little bit cheaper, I would suggest the Shengshou FangYun. So those are my top suggestions. Of course, get anything you want. If you like something that just feels a little bit different out of the ones that are around here, that's maybe different from what you've had, try that. Cubes like the FangShi ones definitely feel a lot different, so if you just want something really different, that's probably the most, individual feeling cubes there. But the big thing is, choose what you think is going to make you practice. If you want to get the Gan Air for solely because Felix uses it, get that. Even if some people tell you that it's better to get a less flexible cube because you're starting out, that might be true for having good accuracy, but if you're going to practice for more and more hours of the day because of this, get that one, because you'll enjoy it more in the end. There is no one perfect cube. One other thing, if you want something that is very stable, that doesn't feel too flexible like all of these, I would highly suggest the Tanglong. The Tanglong has this very stable feel, but can perform just as well as any of these. Thank you very much for sitting through all of this. These are my top recommendations, but all of these can work perfectly fine. Of course, there'll be cubes that come on the next year, so look out for reviews of that. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Hit like, subscribe for more content like this in the future, and as always, stop by speedqbview.com for more news and reviews.